homegrown, undisputed champion, an honored member of the Professional Bowling Hall of Fame, Mike Berlin, a Muscatine native whose talent and drive allowed him to achieve a legendary career as a professional bowler.
Will tell us the number 2 man from Muscatine, Iowa, with 1 PBA title, Mike Berlin.
Mike was about 13 when he first discovered bowling. A friend's dad took them bowling, and Mike's natural ability was immediately recognized, being invited to bowl in an adult scratch league. Berlin was always considered athletic. As a Muskie, elected co-captain of his senior baseball team by Coach Lefty Schnack. To this day, Mike still credits his baseball career to his success in bowling. Before making his career as a professional bowler, Mike had a humble job delivering bread. As Mike was quickly being invited to more and more tournaments, he began to realize he had become completely gripped by the game. In 1968, Mike won the famous Peterson Classic in Chicago, Illinois. At that time, the $35,000 first prize was the largest amount ever to be won in a bowling tournament. Throughout the Midwest, Mike was becoming a legend. In the 1970s, bowling was followed by millions of fans, generally considered the golden age of professional bowling, and was often featured on The Wide World of Sports.
Wide World of Sports, which features
A national audience watched breathlessly as the drama would unfold. At its height, professional bowling championship events received the same television treatment and broadcast coverage as the MLB and NFL.
You know, each sport has its ultimate event, be it a World Series, a Super Bowl.
It was during this time that Mike Berlin burst onto the scene.
Took home the honors.
Setting the tone for the decade in 1970, Mike was the USBC All-Events champion with a series score of 2,004 pins.
35-year-old Mike Berlin.
Mike was one of the best, making adjustments in-game.
I made a little move to the right. I knew that I had to strike a little bit more than I was. I wasn't getting the 10 out very well, so I made a move to the right. I stayed out there the rest of the night.
Look out.
They could hear that all the way back to Muscatine, Iowa.
With a high backswing and long follow-through, Mike got the ball further down the lane than virtually all other bowlers.
Vern, here's the ideal style of Mike Berlin. Very powerful. His arm is locked all the way through the swing. Very high back swing where he generates a lot of speed, but watch his elbow. It never breaks at any point of release. All the way through the follow-through. That is perfect.
And very skilled at playing the changing oil patterns of the lanes.
This man's a good spare maker. Watch this shot.
Oh, that's a lesson in perfection.
Dominate the 70s.
Backswing once again, and he got the double. Looks like he's got it back together a little bit. But Mike Berlin will not quit. You have to beat Mike Berlin. He never beats himself. He is a tough competitor. This is a must strike right here.
G9th frame. Mike Berlin, 226. Working for the 3-bagger.
$15,000 to the winner.
And Diddy. Oh my goodness, yes. He just jumped all over that ball. Mike Berlin, 226 for Pete Couture. And Mike Berlin.
Here's the situation, Chris. Berlin must throw a double here in the 10th and 11th frame. Do not count out Mike Berlin. Berlin's a tough competitor. He's smart. He's a very experienced player.
Mike Berlin from Muscatine, Iowa, takes him out.
Losing one of the last 16 games.
And that's his TV record. A lot of football teams, any team would love to have that record. He is 15-1 going into this match.
Known as the Firestone Classic, this was professional bowling's annual tournament of champions. Mike was in top form, totaled 1,857 pins, and rolled his way through to the finals. Mike was focused.
Mike Berlin. Look at that face of concentration.
Berlin started the final game with 4 strikes in a row.
4 in a row.
And Durbin could only spare. Both bowlers spared in the 5th frame.
Leading a 6.
The 6th and 7th frames were close. Durbin doubles in the 7th and 8th.
Mike Berlin converts. He is our new champion. Needs 5 pins.
But Berlin goes on to win this tournament 221 to 205 over Mike Durbin.
Tell you what, we have a new champion.
And wins a hefty $25,000 first prize. After Mike's big win, curiously, the Akron Gazette refers to Mike as the sport's biggest hustler. An April 1977 headline exclaims, "Berlin hustled his way to pin title in Firestone." Another interesting fact, Mike even got to meet the MGM Lion. Mike was 33 when he was actually awarded the first ever PBA Rookie of the Year. In 1982, Mike was inducted into the Iowa Bowling Hall of Fame at the age of 37. 12 years later, in 1994, Mike was enshrined in the American Bowling Congress Hall of Fame. Mike still ranks among the top 10 career averages in ABC events. When Mike Berlin turned 50, he joined the Senior Tour, and he had to attend a 3-day PBA school that is required by the league. Mike says he made many good friends on both tours. Having found so much success in the world of bowling, Mike has made a business out of his adventures, opening a pro shop in Playmore Lanes right after Bob Crawford opened it in 1975. To this day, Mike and his son Scott, who over the years has teamed up with his dad to bowl on many successful championship-level bowling teams. And if he's not in his shop, you might catch him out on the lanes, still mentoring younger bowlers and sharing stories of professional bowling.
And there is a 3-bagger.
Hi, I'm Lori Landfair from the Muscatine USBC here at the Rose Bowl in Muscatine. We're going to interview Mike Berlin and the history of bowling in our area and Mike's days on the tour. Hi.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. What is your first memory of going to a bowling alley, and how old were you, and who took you?
I was 13 years old. A friend of mine, Steve Hindle, we lived a few houses away, and we played together all for a long time. His dad, Harry Hindle, took us to bowling. The first day that the automatic pin setters were installed at Playmore Lanes, which was downtown Muscatine, where Central State Bank is now, and we bowled 2 games.
Oh, my.
First time I bowled, like anybody else, you pick up a light ball and you try to throw it hard. Harry was a pretty decent bowler, and his nickname in the bowling alley was Hooker, and he made the ball curve. So as a baseball player, I knew that if you spin it this way, it will curve. I think I can spin a bowling ball the other way and make it curve too. So I started that, and I got a couple strikes, and I was hooked.
Well, good. I was just going to say, were you naturally a good bowler then?
I picked it up pretty fast, yes.
Yeah, well, good. And how many days each week did you bowl?
Well, as a kid, I know that bowling was 25 cents a game, which was a lot of money. I had a paper route, and I made about $3 or $4 a week. And we would pay our bill on Saturday morning, and I got some of the other paper boys, and we'd go bowling for nickels, and I usually would end up with enough to pay for my bowling. So that worked pretty good. As the years went along, I bowled a lot, not almost every day.
At what age did you have your first 300 game?
19.
How did you learn to read the lanes
Well, you do that from experience.
in the practice?
I never really had a coach, so I picked things up watching, and I knew, I don't know how I learned that. I just learned it. I knew if your ball hooked too much, that if I moved to the left a little bit, and I watched bowling on TV, they did do a little bit of, got into what the bowlers were doing, and I watched, and
Because then it was the ABC, the American Bowling Congress,
right.
wasn't it?
And then as I got older and started bowling in a lot of tournaments, you meet people and you talk. They'll tell you something that maybe will help you, and maybe I would tell them something that might help them. But it just became a learning process, and I never quit learning.
It shows with all of your accolades and the way you bowl. It just shows quite a bit of that. When did you begin to compete professionally?
1975. I had bowled as an amateur for a lot of years and was winning everywhere. And it just got hard to find good scratch tournaments to bowl in that paid a lot of money, where you could travel for a weekend and get home, and if you didn't win, you usually didn't make much money. So I had heard about these PBA regional tournaments, and there was one in Oskaloosa, and I went there and entered as an amateur and finished second.
Wow.
The next week, I found out that there was one in Springfield, Missouri. Now we're getting quite a ways from home, but I entered that, and I won. So they came to me afterwards and said, you can no longer bowl these tournaments unless you join. That is the PBA rule.
Is it like your third entry? Once you can bowl
You
three
can
as
cash,
an amateur?
I think you can cash twice.
Oh, okay.
So I filled out the papers, got several of the pros to sign, which you had to have people sign for you. That was that. And then later in the year, I bowled my first tournament in Battle Creek, Michigan. There were two on the fall tour. I bowled that one, and the next week I bowled in Chicago, and I cashed both of them. I had never dreamed that I wanted to go bowl all over the country every week. And then as the next year came around, I bowled 16 tournaments for the year out of 30-some. So I pick and choose and still bowled regionals on the weekends in between. And I won in the fall my first tournament, which made me eligible for the Firestones. So it was just a steady progression. And I went in Minot, North Dakota, and I was also the Rookie of the Year that year. So
In 1970.
1976.
And how many years were you on tour?
75, a couple tournaments, through 82, a couple tournaments, and most of those pretty much full time. But I never liked I didn't like being gone months at a time.
Yeah.
And at the time I still had a business to take care of, which is hard to do when you're not there.
Were you in the pro shop then, or were you still working for Wonder Bread?
I was in the pro shop.
Okay.
I quit working in the early 70s because I found out that I could go farther away on the weekends where I didn't have to work Saturday, find good amateur tournaments to bowl, and I got a long ways from home where you just drive on Thursday and come home on Sunday night.
Well, I only know the Wonder Bread story because you bowled a tournament over in Aledo, Illinois, my hometown.
I did, yes, I did.
With my dad at the bowling alley, so.
He told me how he was
I
fixing the
know.
lanes, and they had a really good tournament. And that was on my bread route, and
You came back
I
to
ate lunch with him
Muscatine.
that day, and he was telling me how he'd learned to make these lanes easier. So I got done working, and I called my friend in Iowa City, and we came over, and
Cleaned house.
I won the tournament, and I think he shot 300 and won the jackpot. So we did pretty good that day.
And what are the couple of the most memorable places that you've bowled? Most memorable.
Oh, well, I got to in the 70s and early 80s. I was on the AMF staff of champions, and they sent me to England for a week
Really?
with some other bowlers, and we went probably 10 different bowling alleys in 5 days.
Wow, that's an
Drive, bowl,
experience.
drive, bowl. So I got to go all over the place. I mean, that was
They're
pretty
not that
good.
close there. They don't have as many.
No,
they're
we
bowling
started
alleys
out.
hours away from places.
Now I flew into London, and we drove to Leeds, which must have been 4 hours, and that was an overnight flight. So, but that was interesting, and it was over before I even knew it. I mean, the time went so fast, but that was fun. Some of the, I don't know. There's so many, but I can't think
You
of
like
how
the
many.
bigger houses or the smaller houses?
Well, in my amateur days, you could find every 8-lane bowling center in Iowa had a tournament in the spring. And 2 or 3 of us would go. We'd start on Saturday afternoon and bowl till they kicked us out at 3 or 4 in the morning. Get up on Sunday and go find a few more going back toward home. And you could find them all. And they were all different. And those tournaments were pretty good.
Yeah, for the state of Iowa, I think Muscatine here at the Rose Bowl, based on what's still left available to bowl at, because a lot of houses have closed. This is one of the nicest houses.
This is one of the best, and one of my favorites. I won a lot of tournaments here over the years, and it always fit my game, the way the lanes like to play. And I used to hate if somebody would come in here and win a tournament that I bowled in. So I know that in 1977 or 8, I brought the pros here to bowl a regional, like what we're going to have in October.
Yes.
And they all came, big names. Nelson Burton Jr. and Jim Stefanich and Dave Sutar, and had a huge field. And I won the tournament. So they're just hard to. The regionals were made for bowlers that don't want to bowl on the tour full time, that can still hold down a job, come and bowl on Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday, and go home and go back to work on Monday.
Still doing what they
So
enjoy.
there are a lot of good bowlers that aren't necessarily touring players, but they are professional bowlers, and that's what regionals are made for.
And to make money on the weekends.
And yes, to make and pick up a few dollars. But if you're an avid competitive bowler, yeah, the money is a lot, but it's the competition
Yeah.
and what it makes you feel like when you are in that environment, and it's something that just doesn't go away.
As we have talked about, or you hinted or brought up about the tournament coming in October here, a PBA, PWBA, and a PBA 50 tournament, the motto or the theme of that tournament is because of the obvious love of the game that you have is what the whole precedent of that whole tournament is about. It's for the love of the game. It's just as you were just describing for the other bowlers, it's the competition. It's because we like the sport.
That's what it's when you're a tournament bowler. It's the competition that drives you.
Yep.
You know you're not going to go and win every tournament.
And you know
If you're
that
good
going
enough, you'll win your share, but you win a very small percentage of those you enter. But it's the competition and the people that you meet along the way, and I met a lot of different people that I can remember as a teenager, after I started bowling, championship bowling was on Saturdays. I never missed that. That was before the tour started being on TV. And I would go to the library and I'd read up on the history, and I knew all that stuff. And probably one of the biggest moments of my life when I got inducted in the Hall of Fame is at the dinner. I got to sit with Joe Norris, and I know most people right now won't even know who these people are, but Bill Lillard and others that I watched bowl on championship bowling in the 50s. And
Your idols.
the stories that I heard that night were really good, just like the stuff I talked to around here too. So you just make so many friends and meet so many people, and I still talk to guys occasionally.
Nice. Whoa. So, how did you prepare for big matches, mentally and physically?
Well, obviously, practice is key. That you have to do that. And I like to bowl by myself during the day, at least 4 or 5 games a day. Never shot spares. I was a good spare shooter. I didn't have any problem making spares. But playing different angles, playing the lanes the way they were that day, and just little games that you can do in your head to do different things. If you play the lanes wrong, you have to throw a perfect shot. So it was fun to try to do that.
To adjust.
Because all of the lanes are not easy. And in the 60s and 70s, you had rubber balls and then later plastic balls. You didn't have easy lanes, so you had to do the work yourself. Your equipment didn't do it for you. And if you went to a tournament, you maybe took 2 balls, although most people didn't even have 2. So that was the big difference between then and now. And accuracy became, obviously you had to be able to put something on the ball, but accuracy was extremely important or it didn't work.
Physically?
At times, well, I played baseball my whole life. That was my sport until bowling, and then I still played in the summer.
Did you have a workout or routine that you did?
I didn't really do that, although at times, before the pro tournament in Davenport in 1977, I took 4 weeks off. I went out to the West Coast and bowled a couple of weeks, and then I came home. I started riding the bike 5 miles a day. I would bowl 4 or 5 games here, and then in the afternoon I'd go to Davenport and I'd bowl there for 5, 6 games. So over that 4-week period, the house in Davenport, and I had a pro shop there too. I knew every board in those lanes, just like I know these. And I lapped the field and won the tournament. And that was a huge tournament because of so many people yelling and screaming for you instead of for Mark Roth and Earl Anthony, who were the big names at that time.
Names, yes.
And they bowled in that tournament. But that was one of my highlights of my career, was winning in front of the hometown people. But I did train for that.
Because the legs are one of the bigger...
The legs are... And I played softball when I shouldn't have been, because you slide in the second and break an ankle or jam a finger. And so I quit playing earlier, but I always wanted to go back and do that. So I wasn't very smart.
What is the largest obstacles a young bowler must overcome to be a pro?
Well, temper. It's pretty important to listen to somebody that knows what they're talking about, which most kids don't like to do. Probably more than anything is the cost.
The cost, but the great thing about bowling is that it's not based on the weather.
No,
You can do it anytime.
it's not like golf. Most of the time your ball comes back.
Yes.
You can find it. In order to be, and most of the young pro bowlers now are coming out of college with good programs and a lot of instructions, and they learn just about everything you need to learn
They're intense on their
to
coaching.
bowl. But they have to have a good mind. Over the years, I've seen so many people with just absolute beautiful games that couldn't bowl a lick when it counted. So
Pressure.
you have to be able to do all of that to be a top flight bowler.
Because it's not basically just a physical game, it's a mental game.
The
They're
mental
equal
part
parts, equal parts to
is
it.
at least equal, yes. Today, power and speed and revs have taken over the game, so it's a lot different than when I bowled. The accuracy doesn't really play as much as how many boards can I cover and
Make that ball hook.
yeah.
Do you have when is the last time you have bowled professionally?
Well, I joined the senior tour in 1994, and I bowled until 99, maybe 2000. I bowled a couple tournaments in 2000. So that was the end of it. I was having a lot of knee trouble. The traveling was fun. I had more fun on the senior tour than I did going back and seeing guys that you bowled against in the 70s.
See how well they aged.
Yep, and they can still bowl,
Sure.
and the scores were super high. But when we got done bowling, we went and played golf,
Sure.
where
That friendship.
there was competition in that too. Two tournaments every week on the best golf courses in town, and it was all handicapped. But there were a lot of guys were really good. A lot of people were really bad. The wives played. Everybody had a good time. So that was that pretty much took up the week.
That's the best thing about bowling. I think the sport itself is the bond that you become with everybody. I mean, the friends that you develop, and it's just kind of not like any other sport, I think. But
it is. You're close together when you're bowling, and it's just you meet a lot of people.
yep, make good friends. Did you have a favorite bowling ball manufacturer?
I've had over the years certain balls that were really good for me, all the way back when plastic balls were good. Those seemed to be a little better than rubber balls. I had serial numbers that I looked for that I thought hooked a little more than others. And then the soaker came out, which was soaking balls in lacquer thinner, which made them softer. And you could drop them on the floor and they would splat. And in '73, Don McCune, who was a journeyman bowler, became Bowler of the Year. And all of a sudden, he was out hooking the entire field. But he finally got drunk in the bar and told somebody what he was doing.
Whoopsie.
And pretty soon they were all doing it. And then it became, this is volatile stuff. So they put a stop to that.
Sure.
And
Do they have to test
then the
balls
manufacturers,
then? Did they test the balls then for that lacquer thing after that when it got exposed?
they chewed, the lanes chewed them up.
Oh,
So
got
they
it.
didn't last very long.
Got it.
Boy, were they powerful. Then the manufacturers started making them that way. So then the ABC had to say, okay, they can only be a certain hardness. And I'll never forget when I learned about this. I learned about this I was bowling in Birmingham, Alabama. And this was before the tour days and a big tournament down there. And the guys that finished first and second were both using what they called soakers. And I couldn't wait to get home. I ran down to Sherwin-Williams and bought a 5-gallon bucket of the methylethyl ketone. Went out in the back porch and I filled a bucket up, threw a ball in there and left it in there for an hour and a half. Took it out, ran to the bowling alley, and I couldn't believe it. I could make it hook 10 times more than it was hooked, my other ball would hook.
Wow.
So I probably took advantage of that because in Iowa, we don't see all this stuff.
Sure.
Or the other bowlers don't see all this stuff. And I probably won the first 3 tournaments I bowled
Using that?
using that kind of a ball. And it was such an advantage. And then it went from that, and then manufacturers started making balls like that. And then from there, it went to, in the 80s, it went to urethane, which at the time I was on the AMF staff, who made the angle, which was the first one.
Oh, yes.
And I had tested that ball for 2 years, and they didn't tell me what it was, but it was really good. And I couldn't use it on the tour, but I'd use it in practice because it wasn't available to everybody.
To purchase.
And the pinfall was way better than what I could get with what I was using. And then as soon as they come out with, made that ball legal, they put more oil on the lanes, so it didn't change, it didn't help anybody.
Correct.
It just made the better bowlers better.
Sure, sure.
And then I went from there. In the 90s, the reactive balls came out, and then the scores have skyrocketed, and these balls do it all themselves.
Yeah, the weight blocks and everything is
Yeah,
just
it's all
you drill it.
all scientific, chemically made, and they're just way better than they used to be. And they cost a lot more.
They are really expensive, yes. Excuse me, let's go back. What was your proudest accomplishment?
Whew. Well, I would guess winning the Firestone probably would have to be at the top. Winning the Peterson is right up there.
The Peterson Classic, you have to explain what that was.
The Peterson Classic was a tournament in an old bowling alley. There were no dots on the approaches or arrows on the lane, and they did the lanes with paintbrushes. So they were extremely hard and basically pretty much impossible for most people. I won it the second year I bowled. It paid $35,000 in 1968. It was a lot of money. 18,000 entries. And at one time after that, we had 2 squads of 32 bowlers that went there every year. And now there are none.
Well, the house is closed, but they moved to a different house.
They have, they shut that building down, yeah. It's moved around 4 or 5 different places.
Okay.
They still have it. It's still hard, but it's not as popular as it once was. Mm-hmm. And to tell you the truth, people don't want to go be tested. They want to score.
Correct. Yeah, they want to compete.
Right.
And that's not a really competition because it's just a crapshoot, really.
Well, I know guys that went for the first time, I'd like to bet them $10 they'd bowl at least one of the 8 games under 100. And they'd all jump on it, and I didn't lose many bets.
That's how you paid for that bowling. With your bets.
Yeah.
Who were some of the more memorable celebrities you've met?
Oh, God.
That Joe Norris you were just talking about?
In all the bowlers, I mean, they to me, were celebrities. Don Carter, Dick Weber, those guys were my heroes, mm-hmm. and became friends. Mm-hmm. I met them They must have liked me because they'd always talk to me. But on the other side of that, all the bowlers, when I bowled, if I look to the right, there's 10 Hall of Famers that are Hall of Famers now. If I look to the left, there'd be another 10 or 12. I don't see that today.
Correct.
There aren't as many good ones as there were. And to say that I knew and bowled against all these guys, to me is an accomplishment.
Oh, yes.
And when I went back out on the senior tour, to have these people come up and welcome me back and sit down, and you could sit down and have a beer and lots of stories, you know. But the other thing is that when you bowl in pro-ams, there were a lot of, like Miller Beer had a big tournament in Milwaukee, and they would bring in the light beer celebrities that they had. Mm-hmm. So bowling with these humongous football players, they were retired and they were huge, and meeting those guys, basketball players, baseball players, and I got autographs. So, and I gave them autographs, so it was fun. So, and that was fun too.
Well, I was going to wait and read this at the tournament. Oh my goodness, please tell me I can't get to it. But because we're in this interview, and it seems pretty much fitting at the part we're at in this story, is I had invited Marshall Holman, who is a Hall of Fame bowler, and he replied to me. He says, I appreciate the invitation, but I don't think I will be able to make the tournament in October, this tournament we're having here at the Rose Bowl. In his words to you, he says, please give Mike my best wishes. It was a privilege to compete against him in what arguably could be considered the greatest years in professional bowling.
I agree. Those were the best years of professional bowling ever.
Yeah. So that kind of fit right into that question there, so I had to get that out. I was going to say that later, but I couldn't wait. How did you handle the fame?
Oh, it's hard. When you're doing well at a tournament, when you get done, you're going to the press room. You are hounded by autograph seekers. All the bowlers are. So, and those are things that you have to do. That's part of your job. Those people are paying your way, so you have to do that. And I liked it.
It didn't bother you thinking for the next match or anything like that?
No, I don't think so. You had a job to do. If you made the finals, you were bowling 8 game blocks, and you're bowling 8 different bowlers. And when you get done with one game, you start over. Now, not so much that you worried about what your opponent was bowling, but you had to make your shot one at a time, and that's always the.
That still holds.
And I was always, my match play was my strong point. I wasn't as good a qualifier as I was when I got into the match play. I seemed to excel, and I can't tell you why, but
I can from
maybe that was. But
you don't like to lose.
No, I don't like to lose. No. Well, like I said, you lose more than you win, but trying your best at all times, that was key.
But you can see that come out from you when you bowl, that it's the hunger of the game to win, and you don't step away. I mean, you're in a zone at that point. You want to continue. You want to get that strike, and so.
Well, I can tell you when I first started bowling, I was married, had a baby. Most of the tournaments in Iowa were in Des Moines. There was what they called the Iowa Masters Bowling Association. They had a tournament every month. And I was making about $75 a week. And I would pay my $25 entry fee and gas and a motel. And if I didn't make any money, we may not eat. So I always thought maybe that had something to do with
Extra drive.
yes,
Yeah.
where you had to really get at it, and you got every pin you could get because that might make you another $5. And I've always had that kind of attitude. That's how I approached everything.
Your drive, yeah. Your drive. Do you feel you got the recognition you deserved?
I think so. There were so many good bowlers when I bowled. I got plenty of recognition. I'm in a Rookie of the Year, All-American team twice. Yes.
Do you have any regrets or things you would do differently looking back?
Yes. But I'm not going to tell you.
The secret. Okay. What is one thing you would tell up-and-coming bowlers that they should know or do?
Well, there are a lot of good bowlers. Nobody probably is ever going to be a professional bowler. It's too hard to do.
It is hard.
You have to give up everything. I mean,
Eat,
this
live, and
becomes your
breathe.
life. You have to give it up. Especially growing up in Iowa, professional bowling, I love to watch it. But it never dawned on me that I could ever be a professional bowler. We're in a small town. We're not exposed to it. There were no pro tournaments in the area that you could go watch. That's why I think this is a good idea where some of these younger bowlers, they can come and watch pro bowlers. And if they bowl in the Pro-Am, they can bowl with them. And I really like the idea that we have PBA members. We have the women pros, which nobody around here has probably seen. And then we have the senior bowlers, which they can still do it. I mean, there's no reason you can't. I bowled as good in my 50s as I did in my late 30s. So there's no reason that anybody can't do it. But if you want to become a good bowler and a good league bowler, you have to practice. Nobody does that. And like we were talking before, it costs money if you don't have the equipment. And I don't like the fact that if you and I were of equal ability, I could afford to buy a $200 ball and you couldn't. I'd beat you by 20 pins a game all day. And that's not the way it should be, but that's the way it is today.
Yeah, the equipment is crucial.
Right.
It is crucial. And then, but we were just kind of elaborating on this question. It was how is bowling different and/or the same now as back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s? Is bowling more popular or less popular today? I think it's growing.
Open bowling is still people still bowl. I think they just don't want to be tied down to that 33-week schedule that's where you have to be there every Tuesday night at 6:30. Back in the days, I mean, all the leagues were full every night.
That's what we have talked about. The place was packed.
Yep. And I think a lot of that has to do now with all of the things that kids have to do. The parents, they're footing the bill for all these sports. They're chasing them around all the time, and all of a sudden we don't have any time. And then the rest of it probably is people staying home playing with their computers, and I don't know. But the competitive bowling is not as popular as it once was. There are hardly any tournaments that you can go bowl locally. There used to be a lot of them in the Quad Cities. Like I said before, in the spring, you could find a tournament to bowl every town. Everybody had a tournament. There are none of those anymore. Yeah, there are monthly tournaments for scratch bowlers, but other kinds of tournaments like that, they're just not there anymore.
But there is, I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think there's a little bit of an uptick in bowling the last year. And maybe it's because of COVID that they wanted to get out and they could come here and it's not as contact sport that they could?
I would certainly hope so, because it's a game that you can do forever.
Any age.
You meet all kinds of people. You have fun. I don't know why it's been going downhill for years. It's leveled off. It's not like it was, but open bowling there's still a lot of people with their families that come and bowl as they want to on a Sunday afternoon or Saturday night for glow bowling and things like that. So it's still popular, and I think it's still the #1 participation sport. It's just not in a controlled environment. It's not. The leagues aren't as popular, and when that goes, so does the tournament bowling, and you just don't see that much of it anymore.
Outside of bowling, what are other life ambitions or things you like to accomplish?
That I'd like to accomplish now?
And or have?
I think that I've done everything I need to do. Watch the grandkids and the great-grandkids, and been watching the Cubs, and they're making me sick. So other than that, I don't need to do anything. I've done everything that I need to do. I don't think I need to accomplish anything further than that.
How should Mike Berlin be remembered?
Oh. I'm sure everybody will have a different idea. Among the bowlers that I've bowled against over the years, I think would say a fierce competitor.
Yes.
Hopefully I've treated everybody well in the business world, and that's the best I can do.
It is a lot. You're very well respected. Very well respected. And you just touched on a little bit. What is your favorite sports team?
Well, I've been a Cub fan for 50 years, so it's pretty painful right now, but we'll see what happens.
And then another question we have here is, who are some of the people you've looked up to, been inspired by, or learned from? And that was those guys from the 50s that you had the dinner with at the award?
Those are the true legends of the game. And at that time, which is 94, those guys would have been in their 80s then. I'm sure most of them are all gone now. Dick Weber was an awesome bowler and an awesome person. And I respected him probably more than anybody that I'd ever seen bowl, because of the way he treated people. Always had time for the people for the fans. And Carmen Salvino, one of my favorite people of all time, and became a good friend. And he would put on a show when he bowled. I mean, it was just, it was amazing.
Entertain.
He was an entertainer, as so many of those guys were. He's coming from the 50s, and that's when he was a star. In the 50s and 60s, that's when and if you can catch some of these, I see them on my phone every once in a while, way back in the 50s and 60s. These guys didn't throw the ball and stare. They danced around and ran out every shot and hopped around like kids, but that's what they did in those days. And I remember when I was a kid, I used to practice some of that, so how you do that if you're going to get a strike. But I respect the game of what it is, what it was, how many times it's changed, and the things that are different now than they were then. That's what it's all about.
Well, with your pro shop here at the Rose Bowl and what you do with the kids in bowling here and coaching all of the bowlers, league, open bowling, you also have always made time for everybody. Anybody who wants to better their game, you're always there. So it doesn't go unnoticed. It's deeply appreciated from everybody. And like I said, you're just very highly respected. And we thank you for taking the time to go over some of this stuff from all your years' experience. And look forward to having your tournament here in October, the Berlin Classic, to honor Mike Berlin for all he's done for bowling and honor his career. So,
Well, thanks for having me. It's been kind of fun.
yeah, thanks so much.
Various times, and here's a man in recent years we've enjoyed watching, 35-year-old Mike Berlin.
Mike Berlin gets 8, a spare, a strike, it's a tie. If he gets 9, spare, 9, it's a tie. Strikes on this ball, he wins. The powerful style of Mike Berlin. But watch how he puts a little extra effort in this shot. Watch his head snap as the ball comes through.
That high backswing and take that line again.
Now watch his head pull up as he releases the ball. Just as strong as you can
Your
get.
shot from the PGA Tour.
And when he could put it in that position, just overpower the pins with a nice solid swing. There you saw the benefit of the locked precision swing of Mike Berlin. Under extreme pressure, it did not fail him. It went straight through the target with plenty on the ball. Mike Berlin, what would winning the Firestone mean to him?
Well, Bo, I've been waiting all year for this tournament, and I've not been bowling all that well this year, and I just all of a sudden busted out of it. And it's a great tournament, and it's a great time to bust out of a slump, and I feel pretty good.